Safi.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you all very much for allowing me to crash your party, and forgive me for the rudeness of having just a few words to say and then running out before handling any of the tough questions. If you have tough questions, give them to Professor Brown. He's much smarter, better looking, and he has hair. So those are three qualifications that he can answer questions. And also thank you for Jack for allowing me to go first. Let's start with the classics. Classics that are not just classics of humanity, but also parts of our classics. After all, one of the great benefits of being a Muslim, really one of the last, if not the last, of the great world religious traditions, is to be the inheritor of the wisdom that has come before us, and go back to Socrates and to Plato. When Plato is recounting Socrates' trial, on the 38th line, he says, "The unexamined life is not worth living for a human." The unexamined life is not worth living for a human. And this is what Socrates has to say towards his death. Really one of the great goals of education should be that meditation, that reflection on what it means to be and to become human. Within Islamic languages, we've got these two words which sometimes we use interchangeably, but they're actually quite different. Bashar and insan. And we get both of them within the context of the Quran. Bashar is just a creature. Bashar is just this two-legged creature that we all see around us. And insan is a human being that we have to become. We're born as a creature, but we have to become this creature that's worthy of being God's Khalifa, God's representative, deputy, agent on earth. And that journey from a Bashar to an Insan, of becoming who it is that we're meant to be all along, for me is the real goal of an education, and in particular an education that carries the fragrance of Islam. This is something that's very intimate for me. I've been teaching for about 20 years now in American universities. And a few years ago, I had a young lady who was taking my classes, an American student, not a Muslim. And when you teach in some of these small colleges, you end up having groupies that kind of follow you from class to class. They just sign up for every course that you take. And after they would take 4 of my classes, I would give them a card. I was like, "You're now a member of the Omid cult. Welcome to the club." And so she'd already taken courses where we talked about 9/11, we talked about Palestine-Israel, we talked about the Iranian Revolution. I thought we had really, dealt with a lot of the nitty-gritty political issues that we're faced with. And the last course that she took with me was a course on Muslim poetry. And we read great poetry. Ibn al-Farid, Rumi, Hafiz, Layla and Majnun. And it was one day in class that I noticed that she had tears in her eyes, which is actually a really beautiful experience to see. And being a stupid teacher, I just thought, MashaAllah, look at the barakah that my words have today. Ego. And so she came to my office after class, and I said, "Brianne, you look like you were having a hard time in class today. The poetry really got to you." And she was like, "Yeah, but not what you think." And I was like, "Well, what is it?" She said, "Well, this is my 4th class on Islam. And I've studied 9/11, I've studied fundamentalism and reform and modernity. And until I read this love poetry written by a Muslim poet 800 years ago, the idea that Muslim human beings could ever love so passionately that they would yearn after union with another person had never crossed my mind." So I was crying because I realized that for me, Muslims had become this problem that we in the modern world have to solve, not fully real, loving, existing, hoping, yearning, dreaming, losing, dying, living human beings just like the rest of us. And that's the age in which we live. We can have a conversation about Islamic education, we should. But we're also living in an education where humanities as such are under attack and assault in almost every university, including elite universities. And I want us to really pause and think about the fact of what does it mean when the very disciplines that are devoted to this study of what does it mean to be human? What are the goals and aspirations that we want to pursue in becoming human are being marginalized and pushed down? As people that want to become agents, representatives of God on this planet, I want us to take that challenge seriously. I want us to take seriously what it means to think philosophically, not only in the sense of studying Aristotle and Socrates and Plato, but philosophia, the love of wisdom, which is not about holding certain propositions in your head. Philosophy was a lifestyle for the Muslim sages. What does it mean to practice criticism? You saw this preview about reforming Islamic thought. What would it mean to want to reform a tradition, not because you're ashamed of it or you feel guilty about certain aspect of it, but precisely because you love it enough, you're embedded in it enough, you're connected to a community enough that you want to engage in that practice of criticism. And to do criticism the way that Edward Said used to talk about it, every criticism has to be life-enhancing. Every criticism has to stand in opposition to tyranny and oppression. These are some of the challenges. And just to wrap it up and hand it over to my far better looking colleague, these are conversations that people from other religious traditions have had before us. Rabbi Heschel, whom I always hold up as the most courageous and luminous voice of the Jewish tradition in the 20th century, used to say, why is it that I can go to a Jewish seminary and we can have a perfect discussion on whether Jell-O is kosher or not, but if I ask people, are nuclear wars kosher, no one even knows how to handle that question. And I think the challenge that's before your generation and my generation is to be able to figure out, how do we keep reading all of this magnificent library that's around us, and at the same time always realize and insist that our beings are connected to other people's being, our suffering already mingles with other people's suffering, and that what's happening today and tonight in Ferguson is related to what's happening in Gaza, and that the poverty here in America is possible precisely because of America's militarism. And being able to look at and identify and scrutinize and dream better, imagine higher, strive further for a society that we don't want to just study but we also want to create, is really one of the goals of the education process. Thank you for